Paul, here's something people always ask us. Okay, ready? It's a good question, because why on earth do guilty people agree to take a lie detector test, right? Because you'd think that the last thing they'd want to do is to be strapped to a magic machine that claims to detect lies, and yet they volunteer all the time. We saw Chris Watts doing it. What on earth is going on there? Why? Why do they do that?
Well, I think the short answer is that most people don't actually understand what a polygraph measures. You know, they imagine it's some sort of, some sort of scientific truth detector, and it isn't. You know, the modern polygraph was developed in 1921 by John Lawson, who was a police officer with a background in physiology, and it was building on earlier work done by William Marston, who'd been experimenting with using blood pressure to detect deception. And the goal wasn't to create a machine that proved guilt. It was actually meant to help police notice when a suspect's body reacted strongly during questioning, so that they'd know where to focus. And the way it works is actually pretty straightforward on a physiological level. It tracks changes in things like breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, and skin conductance, which is essentially a sweat response. And these are indications of arousal in the nervous system in particular. And the examiner then asks a mix of control questions and relevant questions. So if your body reacts more intensely during the relevant questions, they interpret that as potential deception. But potential, the word potential is doing the heavy lifting here,
like
because the machine, right, exactly, because the machine can record that something has changed, but it can't tell why it has changed.
Right.
You know, you can react because you're guilty, sure, but you can also react because you're scared.
Right.
You're embarrassed, you're confused, or you don't trust the examiner who's asking you the questions, you know? So the polygraph can only tell you that your nervous system is fired up, but not what triggered it. And that's why it's not admissible in most courts.
Yes.
In fact, I don't know any courts where
I don't
it is
think there's
admissible.
anywhere. I don't think anywhere does.
I mean, it doesn't meet the standard for scientific reliability, you know, because remember, courts need evidence that explains behavior, not physiological noise.
Right. And that's the bit that people forget, right? Because they treat the polygraph like a final authority. Even the police, I've seen, do that.
For sure.
When actually it's really just a stress recorder. It's just measuring autonomic responses, right? So when a guilty person says, sure, I'll take it, they're going in with completely the wrong idea of what it can do.
Exactly. And there's also the overconfidence factor as well that you have to take into consideration. Some guilty suspects genuinely believe they can beat the machine. And it's true.
I know it is, because you see the hubris, can't you?
They think they can stay calm, and then they'll sail through it.
Right.
But they assume that they can control their physiology better than they actually can. Remember, most people who find themselves in these situations, guilty or not, but primarily guilty, aren't really strategic thinkers, Well,
no, because they wouldn't be there, would they? If they were.
No. Right. But even if you're not guilty, you're not thinking strategically,
No, of course,
they're frightened, they're impulsive, or they're trying to bluff their way out.
Right. And then some agree because they want to look helpful, right?
Right.
And they're terrified that refusing will make them look guilty. So then they go the total opposite direction and say yes, right? And then that makes it a social reaction rather than a rational one, right? Because that's...
And that happens a lot, because panic really leads to very poor decisions. And we know this, So a detective will suggest a polygraph, and the guilty person, or just the person, feels cornered, and then they agree to it immediately. They think that saying no will look like a confession. What they don't realize, in most of the cases, is that polygraphs just aren't legally decisive. So refusing one is not the smoking gun that they imagine it is.
No, exactly. And then there's also the when I've rehearsed my story, enough times, I'll be fine. That kind of mindset of that, I'll be able to do it. Because some people guilty will tell their lies so often, it just starts feeling normal to them, right? And so because it feels familiar, they think their body will treat it as truth.
Right, but that's not how physiology actually works. But you can rehearse a lie every day for a month and your body will still react when confronted with a direct threat, Right. And a polygraph setting is threatening. You have to remember, you're strapped down, you're wired up, and somebody is watching you intently. There's an examiner studying every breath you take. And the context alone, is enough to trigger spikes, even if you've convinced yourself that you're calm, and even if you're innocent.
Right. And like that examiner's role really matters too, because they're not passive technicians, are they?
No.
Because polygraph examiners are they're trained in interrogation methods as well.
Right.
They build rapport, they unsettle you. They frame the test as the perfect chance to clear your name, right?
Right.
And a guilty person often interprets that as reassurance instead of strategy. Because they're not strategic.
And the pre-test interview that they do is brilliant at locking people in.
Yes.
They talk through the case, they go over questions, they create a sense of commitment. By the time the machine is switched on, many guilty suspects feel that they've already crossed a line that they can't walk back from. And backing out, they think, is going to look worse to them than carrying on.
Oh, for sure, right? But some would also agree because their families push them into it. Because if relatives think they're innocent, they encourage the test. So the guilty person then feels pressured to comply, to keep up the facade. Makes sense.
And then you've also got to take into consideration the gambler's fallacy, right? So guilty suspects sometimes take the test because they're clinging to the tiniest hope that things might break their way. They're already desperate. So a long shot, it feels like worth taking, doesn't it? Yeah,
for sure. And what about the ones that believe they can manipulate the readings? People who like tense their muscles. Look at me doing it. Mirror neurons. No, I'm joking. Oh, God. We'll do that another time. But people that, they try and tense their muscles, or maybe they bite their tongue to distort the baseline. Those sort of things.
No, to be honest, those tricks are mostly folklore. And even when they do alter the readings a little, the examiner can usually spot it. Yeah. Again, that belief comes from overestimating themselves. If you're sitting in a police station, hooked up to a machine because you're a suspect in a crime, you're probably not the cool-headed strategist that you think you are.
But you might still be in that Delulu land because, and then sometimes people might agree, guilty people might agree, because they think it will help them strategically. Because they think if the investigation's weak, a polygraph might push attention elsewhere, right?
Oh, they do. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
But that's flawed reasoning,
Well, right.
Simply because investigators don't, well, at least they're not supposed to. That's not to say that they don't always, but they don't treat a polygraph as proof. The good ones, anyway, they treat it more as psychological leverage. So it's not a machine that traps people. It's everything that happens around it. Because remember, and I've said this in many of our videos, guilty suspects talk too much.
Ooh, yeah.
They over-explain, they contradict themselves, or they panic during the process. So the polygraph becomes almost a stage for mistakes rather than clarity.
So true. It's so true. And isn't it true that somebody who really is ASPD would actually fail it anyway because they don't have the same responses? Not fail it, pass it. A lie detector test, or not?
Not always, no. That's another one of these myths.
Oh, okay. We'll do a myth-busting session, maybe. Okay, fair enough.
Because it's not that somebody with ASPD doesn't feel stressed, they do, but it may not be stressed because they've committed the crime. It may be stress from the situation. Right. So that's going to be a physiological response. So no, there's
totally
no...
unreliable.
They are totally unreliable. Yeah. They're a 50-50 chance. So they're no better than rolling a dice. you know?
Okay.
Like, they have no relevance. So, no, I mean, people can pass a lie detector test and be lying.
Right.
People can fail a lie detector test and be telling the truth.
I mean, how many Jeremy Kyle people are sitting here now going...
But this is it. The Jeremy Kyle's case was a huge one because they were taking these lie detector tests as gospel truths.
As verbatim, yeah.
And they destroyed so many people's lives.
So many.
I mean, here's the thing, Helen, if you or I were in a police interrogation room and we were hooked up to a lie detector test and we were being accused of a crime, there's a strong possibility, even though we didn't do it, we would fail the lie detector test. It's a 50-50 chance.
Right. But you and I would not be strapped up to a lie detector machine because we would just say no. Because
well, I would just say no, absolutely. Knowing what it is and what it does, I would refuse.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you can't be coerced or forced into doing it.
No. And actually, it's not evidence of you being guilty at all. Right.
No.
So, on all that then, the basis of all that, the answer really is very simple. That guilty people take polygraphs because they misunderstand them. They panic, they overestimate their abilities, or they feel, pressured socially. There's no real mystery to it. It's just very human misjudgment.
Yeah,
really?
Exactly. And that's why polygraphs keep turning up in cases, not because they work as lie detectors, they don't, but because people behave predictably under stress, and you also have to remember that if you do fail it, what it does is it gives the interrogators another tool to say, but you failed the polygraph test, so you must be lying. So even if you're not, they have this perceived evidence to use against you, and it's all psychological. There's nothing in it.
It's just another tool to get you to confess.
Yeah, it is.
Well, there we are.
So,
thanks
that
very
answer
much.
The question?
Yeah, brilliant.